We all here? Yep.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Just turn one. Welcome everybody. Last but one meeting of the year. So apologies for absence. Anna?
Apologies not being received from Councillor Wheeler Chowdhury and Councillor Claire Chowdhury and Councillor Ian Lane.
Thank you. Of course, that raises the issue of quorum again, because unfortunately we're not quorate, and the process now, or the Constitution requires the minutes of this meeting to go to combined authority for noting, and then back here at the next meeting, presumably, which will be quorate, to then approve. But if we're not quorate, then what? The Constitution doesn't see that.
Thank you, Jane. So you're right as you describe the situation. The minutes of an quorum meeting come back to the next meeting of that committee to approve. Obviously, if that subsequent meeting is also in quorum, then it rolls on to the next quorum meeting. So it'll be, hopefully the next meeting is quorum, but it'll go to the next quorum meeting for approval.
Thank you. As you can see from the screen, we do have Councillor Alan Taylor on, who obviously can't make the meeting physically, and Councillor Emma Marshall.
Yes. Yeah. But Emma is non-constituent member, and the quorum applies to constituent members.
That's right, yeah. Well, technically voting members, but you're right. Constituent members are voting members of the committee. Non-constituent members aren't, and the quorum is of voting members.
I was going to say, Councillor Tuck is now online, but we have Councillor Steve,
Amelia
as well. So perhaps he has difficulty getting online. So can I encourage colleagues? I know we did sell at our pre-meet that for the next TDOSC meeting, arrangements are made that everybody's here in person. Every constituent member is here in person, so we can dot I's and cross T's for this year, because I am very keen not to hand over any work to the next TDOSC committee for obvious reasons. All right. Mary.
And I would just add as well, I think it would be good to have everyone attend, as it will be the last meeting of this municipal year, and I think it's only right and correct, and the dates are published ahead anyway.
Okay, declarations of interest. Have any been recorded? Okay. I see no declaration. I see no hands. Next item then, Chair's remarks. Well, I've covered the quorum, and an issue's arisen which leads me to think that at one of our future briefing meetings, we need to have a discussion on the medium-term financial strategy. So over to you on that one, Kate. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, members will be aware that the combined authority budget went to board in February. There was a requested £3.5 million increase in transport levy, which is equal to 3%, which unfortunately was not approved by board. So while that is 3.5 on the 24-25 budget, that is a cumulative loss of 17.9 million over the 5-year MTFP period. We will be rebasing the MTFP very shortly, as we always do, ready to go to Mayor and Portfolio Leaders around May time in that, but that will be a loss of income that we will need to discuss with leaders and the mechanisms for that. Just in context of kind of the rest of the country, Manchester has just put a 4% increase in, South Yorkshire, who we obviously always refer to having a much lower levy, has just put a 2% increase in. So we are not particularly in line with our MTAs at the moment in terms of what we have done with our transport levy.
That is really bad news, and we need to have an understanding what the implications are. Hey, Robert, to going forward, because you mentioned a figure of 17.5 million.
Yes, effectively, because the so that assumes that there is 3% effectively each year pro rata, so 3% for 24-25, another 3%, so 6% going forward into 25-26. So at the moment, if we assume that that does not happen, that would be 17.9 million over the 5 years. So if this levy stays cash flat at the current 119.4 million.
We'll have that briefing, discussion and recommendations for a way forward for next year and subsequent years. Purvis, is there anything you'd like to say?
Just to say that that is the decision of our leaders of Combined Authority Board, and they decided to use the money, which is £250 million, to stabilize the network, which I think, Kate, we used £25.5 million, and they said we might as well use another £3.5 million from that grant to balance the budget because of cost of living crisis that our communities are facing. And I personally think it's a very wise decision, Chair, because we have and are suffering far as our communities are concerned when it comes to levying, not this levy, but also we're putting the burden of council tax increase year by year, and yet we're cutting the services. And also we increase and make more payments far as transport is concerned, and yet we're cutting the network. So we need a long-term sustainable funding for our transport, because as you know, it's a crucial when it comes to economic progress or connecting the communities, that we have a proper long-term funding so our officers can get on with it, providing the services which our West Midland needs.
Thanks, Purvis. So again, it's reinforcing the thought of a discussion on the medium-term financial strategy that will when's our next meeting? It's March
18th.
March 18th. So we'll have a briefing on the medium-term financial strategy of the morning of the 18th. Okay. The other thing that prompted me is there's an announcement today on the monies from HS2 that are to be spent. 4.5 billion was mentioned by the Minister this morning. Do we have an update? Do we know anything about it, Mike?
That won't affect the combined authority areas as we understand it. That is aimed largely at the Shires. So we've had our announcements through CRSTS2 and we've had indicative allocations confirmed for that from the period 2027 onwards, so 5 years.
Thank you very much. Okay, then moving on. The minutes of the 22nd of January, including the action log. And I understand that action was completed this morning, so we're up to date, yeah?
That's correct, Chair.
Any questions? Councillor Hyatt.
Thank you, Chair. I refer people to page 4 and about the recommendations and the lack of a reflection of the discussion that took place around Ring and Ride. We had an interesting and complex discussion about Ring and Ride, during which time our chair said, if it, and by it the review was referred to, is looked at as a financial exercise, it is doomed. It will never ever achieve its objective because of people that it serves. And we need something to reflect that in the recommendations. Something else which was said, which is perhaps there, the committee values the service offered and would seek to retain in some form a transport system for the most vulnerable. If we need to deliver a service of value, we need to ensure monies are there to deliver the service. The review has to be in the light of those people that it serves. Councillor Ward made excellent points too, saying that the review needs to reflect our transport delivery plan, a transport system that is fair to everyone, a transport system with policies in place that provide accessibility for those who face the biggest transport barriers. There's lots to be said, and the lots was said. However, the recommendations that have been listed do not reflect at all the comments that were made. If we look at number 4, the comments of the committee be noted and considered as part of the review requested by the Mayor and Portfolio Leads. There are no comments at all listed. And hopefully that can be changed to reflect what was took place.
Thank you, Chair. Just leaving aside the point about references of what is recorded in the notes, which I'm sure governance team may have a view on. I just wanted to reassure members of this committee that in actual fact, a lot of those key outputs just referred to by Councillor Hyatt are indeed recorded in our notes that are going into the process, which is part of that review with the as requested by the cabinet members. So while there may be a question about reflection in here, there is actually a much more detailed note about those comments made by members that is going to be used and reflected in the piece of work that was shared.
Shared through you. Please come see that then, because there's absolutely no point us having this in-depth discussion, asking pertinent questions, unless that results in action. So please could we have that presented to us when we meet again in March?
Let's resolve this, because you're raising an important issue, recognising and acknowledging that the minutes cannot be verbatim record. And that's understood, and that's a given. But I think the point you raise in subpara 4 in the recommendations, there may perhaps be an item 5 in order to reflect the debate that was had and the decisions taken by committee that then amend this minute to reflect what happened, what actually happened. But it's what I'm concentrating really is on the how we record our business for the future, because it is important that we have an accurate reflection to ensure that committee is content with the actions arising from discussions and debate. So that's perhaps something we'll take away and discuss how best to deal with that with governance, and then come back and report on a way forward. Okay with that? Then
Well, I need to say, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Hyde. She raised this ahead of the meeting, which was helpful. I mean, other than to agree with you, Chair, so we can have that discussion and how it's captured, but it is important that the minutes give an accurate reflection in summary, because they can't record everything everybody says, but clearly the minutes are there as a record of the meeting, and I think probably on this occasion they could have reflected a bit more of that discussion. So we'll take that away. But I think the other point along with that is where members are making comments that are feeding into a subsequent review that's taking place outside of the meeting, then an in-depth note of that needs to be available. And you heard from Pete that it was captured the last time, but we'll look at how we can do that better going forward.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item 5, digger devolution.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just introduce myself for those that don't know me. So Adam Harrison, Principal.
I don't believe that, Adam.
Yeah, well, you've got to be best to check. Principal Policy and Strategy Officer within TFWM's Policy and Strategy team. So this report details a 6-month progress on delivering the transport elements of the Combined Authorities deeper devolution deal with government. The report sets out an overview of progress since September 2023, and that's highlighted in section 2.6. I'll just quickly reflect on a few things that have happened since then, a few successes that we've had. So as mentioned, Matt's right under the Chair's remarks around Network North. So this is providing the CA with increased allocations for Crus 1 and 2. So that's running up to 2032 in terms of the timescale. Also, West Midlands Rail Executive and Great British Rail Transition Team, they've set up a new partnership group, and that was a key commitment within the deal, and that first met in November last year. This group has helped to scope the recently announced Rail Pay-As-You-Go ticketing pilot using SwiftGo, so that is a positive in terms of moving forward on the rail network. So the scope of that pilot has now been agreed and was launched earlier this month at Wolverhampton Station, and the trial is planned to go live in 2025. Also another success, so Birmingham, the NEC was awarded the 2027 World Intelligent Transport Systems Conference, and that was announced back in October 23. And that was a successful bid between ourselves, Department of Transport, Intelligent Systems UK and the NEC. And that working through the contractual details and funding proposal for that to be a key event in 2027, which isn't too far away. Also, the beside governance review and scheme was approved by board in October, and we now await the kind of the statutory instrument from DFT, and that will work through our local constituent authorities and for, I think, the CA board for full approval in due course. And we're also working quite closely with our constituent authorities around the opportunities around digitisation of our road and curbside spaces, which is a really exciting project that we're working with Birmingham in particular on. But it's worth flagging to members that clearly there's been a significant shift in government transport policy since the deal was agreed with the publication of Network North and Plan for Drivers. This has actually impacted a number of areas within the deal, and that includes how we're developing or the continued development of our local transport plan and how beside reform and policy devolution will happen. So there's delays around those, and they are set out in paragraph 2.8 and 2.10. It's also worth noting that last week a draft rail reform bill was published, and West Midlands Rail Executive will have the opportunity to influence that bill, as there is a session being led by the Transport Select Committee on that bill. However, we still think it's unlikely that that bill will pass during this parliamentary session. But in those paragraphs that highlighted 2.8 and 2.10, we set out our planned mitigations in response to some of these challenges and how we work forward in terms of making sure that we deliver the agreements within the devolution deal for transport. So that was a bit of a quick overview, so happy to take any questions or clarify anything within the report.
If I may, from the chair, you say it is unlikely that the work being done currently in Parliament will be completed. Does that mean then that work is lost with the dissolution of Parliament?
I wouldn't say it's lost, but then it'd be up to a successor government to decide whether they want to take forward the draft bill or any recommendations within that. So it'll be for a new government to decide whether they wanted to take that through a full legislative process. It's a very unique way. You don't see draft bills very often. The way that they've done it, it's been a very odd way of doing things, I would say. But there are, if it's done right, there might be some opportunities to make sure that rail reform isn't lost and something is delivered in a new parliament, depending on who wins a forthcoming general election.
Councillor Hyatt?
Few questions, Chair. Is there any consequence? What are the consequences of the VSOP delay? And the second question is, how far should we jump, given the uncertainty of the future, given the potential for a change of government, which may or may not take place? How far should we move from where we are, which is carefully thought out, carefully planned, have the strategies, developed almost in place? How far should we move at this precise moment in time?
Okay.
John. So, Pete, you may want to come in on this. On the SOG, we're incredibly frustrated around reform to the SOG. It's been an issue that we've pushed for a very long time. And we're hoping to kind of keep that pressure up. As we've said, we've always offered the Department of Transport an alternative way to do how the SOG is divvied out to operators, and trying to incentivise operators to switch to zero emission vehicles and to grow networks. Pete, I don't know if you want to come in a little bit on that one.
That pretty much sums it up in a nutshell. Is that at the moment, the way that we think VSOP is being provided on a national basis doesn't necessarily incentivise the best outcomes that we could achieve regionally. So we feel we're pushing on that objective to ensure that there is some devolved approach to not only managing VSOP but also driving policy and direction out of it is still a clear ambition of the region, and we think the step that go ahead earlier interventions and objectives could be made that could start to assist this region in delivering outcomes.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to refer to page 11, if I may, and in reference to the infrastructure. Can I first of all welcome the extra £100 million which is forecast to be used, and I'm going to tell our members what the acronym means. It's the Wednesbury to Brierley Hill extension. And also I'd like to mention on behalf of my colleagues as well, hard and crossed, we both welcome this extra money coming in. My question, Mr. Chairman, would be how secure would it be now of taking the metro into Brierley Hill from Dudley? Is that included in this figure? And that's really the question I want to ask. Welcome the money coming in, but does it include taking the track from Dudley to Brierley Hill?
Okay.
I'll just come back to Councillor Hyatt's second question. So in terms of long-term future planning, that's where we think we've been ahead of the game on preparing a local transport plan. So setting out what we want to do as an area going forward in terms of the future vision. We think that we're able to kind of respond in some of the changes to government policy, but our view would be this is why devolution is important. We think that we know what we need to improve our transport system, and we may do things in a slightly different way to how some of the kind of wider national context around that kind of plan for drivers narrative is played out. But we think there are areas where it does align. So in fact, where we are with digitalisation or digital roads or the kind of rules of the road projects that we've been doing, is that we're kind of national leaders in some of this area. So we think we're on the right path in terms of responding to some of those changes within government policy. On Wednesbury Brierley Hill, Anne, would you have to pick that one up?
Councillor Stanley, as you know, because we've come to your committee, the extra funding that's come via Network North, not just for Wednesbury to Brierley Hill extension, but for all of the other projects, they're all subject to business case work. So we've got to take those through government to make sure that we can draw down that money. There was also some other money for Wensbury to Bromley Hill extension which came from DLUC as well, another 60 million. So we are just going through the refresh of the business case, and we will be looking to come back to the CA board in July, so investment board and CA board during July, in order to sort of present what that business case is telling us in terms of whether it's value for money, etc., with the aim of submitting it then to both departments. So we are working with government departments to make sure that we've got the approvals process for them to also sign off on a business case. So that work is underway, and we will bring that information back through the CA board.
Okay, David?
Yeah, well, just to respond to that, of course, it's still welcome news. At least we're trying to get the investment made where we possibly can. As I say, anything welcome on the Metro in Dudley, more than welcome. And I'm sure this is the same applies to Arden Cross. Around the National Exhibition Centre, I believe, isn't it? That's right. So let's hope they're successful and we hopefully achieve and get this work completed. Thank you.
Okay, so Kuna. Sorry.
Okay, sorry, apologies. Could you tell me a little bit more about the digitising street space project, please? What that entails?
So this is building on some of the work that we did for the future transport zone. So traditionally, things like transport regulation orders were very much paper based and done in a way where it was slightly archaic. So we've been working with some of our constituent councils about how we digitise that and how we put it on platforms where they're easily accessible. So if you're a developer or someone planning some interventions, that's made available. And it's going the next stage forward really about how to use that curb space more dynamically and a bit more intelligently. So for example, if you look at things like freight and logistics, how could you book a space in a certain area to do deliveries and make that more manageable? So it's still a technical project at the minute of trying to make sure that we manage our I suppose parking spaces and curbside and streets in a better way really to kind of take that forward, because a lot of those things like TROs, traffic regulation orders, and some of those are really kind of paper based and very much difficult to find sometimes. They're probably in an archive in some basement somewhere. So having that as a digital thing is quite an important thing about how we can make that more accessible going forward.
Okay. Oh, sorry, welcome. Yep.
Yes. Sorry. So is that in relation to sort of you mentioned obviously when we've got companies who are working and obviously they need to book street spaces, but then you've also mentioned TROs. So is that like, for example, for fines and stuff as well? Like, for example, if someone is issued a fine as a result of parking on a TRO, and then they pay fines via a digital system, is that part of that as well? Or
Sorry. Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the impact on the residents, and also, so my reason for asking that is obviously we have a lot of elderly, especially in Birmingham, we have a lot of diverse populations, and obviously elderly residents who might not be able to sort of navigate the digital systems. Do we have alternatives for residents who might not be able to sort of like have online access or might have language barriers, etc.? That's what I'm trying to get to really.
I'll just jump in on that one if that's okay, Chair. Really, this one goes back to some of the more recent government announcements where we were looking at how we drive some efficiencies into the way the back office systems work. It doesn't particularly affect the, if you like, the user on the street, because the default position is whatever the sign or the line says is what it is. The issue has been that there's very labour intensive back office processes to reconcile the legal order against what is actually physically on the roadside, and to then make some of that accurate information available for some of these secondary services. So, for example, a freight and logistics operator will often choose to disregard loading bay restriction that might only be for, say, 20 minutes, know that they're only going to get called up with a fine every once in a blue moon on that. But it means that that curb space is managed very inefficiently. There's strong evidence from the freight logistics sector. They'd rather actually book and pay for that. So, and that's better for them as business, because then they plan and they've got certainty and it works. So until you can't do any of that until you can digitise the underlying back office processes. The government is now about to mandate that all local highway authorities have to do this. It's slightly unclear when actually kick in. This region's ahead of the curve at the moment because of the work that was done under the Future Transport Zone, where we started to actually work with the 7 local highway authorities and understand what works for them and how we establish the system. And we've established now an underlying technical system that supports this, and a number of the authorities have moved over to that system already because it simply offers them greater efficiency in their own back office working.
Thank you.
I was just going to reassure you as well that this is different to the fixed penalty notice system. So if somebody's parked on a double yellow line and they've had a ticket through the parking enforcement officer, they will now have a digital record to go back and check that traffic regulation order is enforceable as well. But it doesn't affect the parking enforcement and what the parking enforcement officer is doing. It just gives them an added tool to check as well. So it's not direct issue for the local residents as you described.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Watson?
I find it when there's work and things going on in my area, one of the things I'm linked to is One Network, and they are really good. So that if they've got he's got TRO, you can put the name of the street. I know not everyone's got a computer or smartphone, but it does help, and you can circulate it around your area and let your residents, schools and things like that know there's waterworks, electrical, whatever going on for however many days. So I find it's like a bit of an asset, like a bit of a tool in my armoury, if you like.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah. How does this fit in with the reopening plan for rail station, Martin? Benefit online, sorry. How does this fit in with the reopening of rail stations, which we're sort of working through phase feasibility for some and some more advanced?
So obviously that work is funded by the to using a figure for us because it's not a very good one, but the capital funding that we've got, so that is part of that additional money would support that kind of future planning in terms of working to that kind of what 8-9 year window now through Crust 1 and Crust 2. So that's where some of that additional money and that allocations will help to support that, subject to them passing full business cases. So it is a positive in terms of that.
So what would the feasibility work that's been done recently on Castle Bromwich Station be part of that?
It would be in terms of the next stages of doing the strategic case on that. Should declare an interest. I am a Castle Bromwich resident as well, so that's obviously quite a positive thing. But it's all subsequent. The next stage probably being what would be in the Crust 2 programme in terms of whether it passes the business case and whether it's taken forward or they're taken forward as full construction projects.
Okay.
Just to confirm again that there's £1 million that's been released out of CRSTS2 to do the next stage business case for Castle Brom and a couple of other stations as well. They, as Adam's just said, they need to be successful in order to draw down additional funding for construction, which will likely come via CRSTS2 as well. But again, that's all subject to developing the wider programme over the whole of that CRSTS2.
Thank you. Right. The recommendations are in front of us. Are we agreed? Aye. Thank you very much. Item 6, real-time information. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. The report for you is got 3 recommendations. One really seeking your overall scrutiny and comment on the progress that has been made to date in trying to make.
Can you get the
Mike? So 3 recommendations. The first, in your scrutiny input and comment on the progress that we've been making towards improving the real-time information system. Just for clarity, that is both the gathering of the information right from the original source, so the bus operator and the bus, and how that is processed through to both the roadside screens, whether that's in a bus station or a bus stop, as well as through to an app and website environment. So we've captured that. The report, as it clarifies, is focused predominantly on the bus environment. That is our biggest public transport user. There are some commonalities in the system to that used for metro and rail, but we are focusing for the purposes of this report predominantly on the bus. The other one is really asking you to note the complexity of the system and our approach to addressing that. This isn't one single pillar system. It is many different systems all communicating to each other. And even in the most simplistic example you can probably find in the country how these work, there are still multiple systems having to talk to each other. And the other final point of the recommendations is to seek your endorsement and commentary on the communications plan, because we've been doing quite a lot of work to improve the system. I think that perhaps is not currently well communicated to travellers, and the communications plan in the appendix of the report seeks to explain that we do recognise that there are issues, that there are still issues to fix, to communicate the improvements that we have been making and have made, and those that they can expect to see over the coming months and years. I don't think I will pick up a lot else beyond to say you will note from some of the KPI figures in the report that some significant improvements are being made now. So we have coverage where we've actually got a working display, and the display is providing information at a lot of stops. One of the issues that we acknowledge in the report that is our current focus is around clearing down the message, so that occasionally at the moment we've got too many occurrences of a display at the roadside still showing a vehicle due when the vehicle may actually have arrived and might have been on time and gone and left, but the display hasn't cleared the message off. And that obviously, if you're unfortunate enough to arrive at the bus stop in that window, that can be quite misleading. So that's our big priority improvements in our overall plan at the moment. And the other thing I really wanted to just draw out from this report, whilst we are doing a lot to improve the infrastructure and the systems behind it, what we're 100% dependent upon is the bus operators feeding that information in. So even when we've got the system absolutely optimized, unless we get good quality information into the system at the right point from the vehicle or from the bus operator, then obviously there's an old adage about the quality of something going into the system equals the quality of that coming out of it. And I think the bus operators are having challenges doing that, as well publicised and understood constraints that they're having operationally, financially. Many of the bus operators have their resources going into this. So I'll leave that.
Okay, got somebody had a mic on. Thank you, Mr. Waters. Very concise. Councillor Hyatt, is there anything you'd like to add? Your Meg is looking into RTI.
Yes, we had a very instructive session at our last Meg, and a massive thank you. I mean, it was very transparent. It was very open. The problems that have been faced were laid out very clearly, but also the commitment to improve was absolutely obvious and transparent and easy to see. If you Google the future of transport, digital is writ large. You know, we are becoming a digitalised society, and the need to define reliability in terms of knowing when the bus is going to turn up. That will be our future, really. That will be the future of transport. We will know exactly when to expect the bus. The bus will turn up, and that just, you know, will make people more likely to use it. I want to say thank you very much for the transparency of the documents and visuals. It needs to be funded properly. That is the reality. If we're going to have a real-time information service that serves the best interest of residents that use our buses, then it will need to be funded correctly. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you for that. We're back to the medium term stuff. Councillor Huxtable and then Councillor Stanley.
Thank you very much. As has already been alluded to, I believe, obviously that we have RTI systems both on rail and metro as well as bus. And I think that's something that I will raise with my rail sprint and metro meg as well, so that we can have that sort of combined approach, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, I've been very vocal lately in various meetings with regards to this particular item. It does concern me that we just don't seem to be getting it right, and I'm beginning to wonder, after listening to conversations now, whether it applies to all operators or individual operators that are not compliant with us, which makes the job more taskful. I'm not going to name them, you please to know, but I do think, to be perfectly truthful, what we need to take into consideration here is the people that are out there waiting for buses that are vulnerable. You've got people exposed to the elements, especially in Dudley, as I made it clear to you, the shelters are not adequate to get covered during heavy rain. And surely we don't want people getting absolutely soaked to the skin, waiting for a bus that's not going to turn up. At least, you know, we've got to look at the general public's usage of this system. And as I say, there are people out there that are vulnerable at times. About waiting for sometimes in excess of an hour, just standing there in the street waiting for a bus to come. Notice on one of the pages it just say cancelled and stuff like that, but I've never seen that used on any in my area. But I think really now we do really seriously need to take the general public into account by supplying them with the information they require and not expecting to stand there waiting time and time again in the soaking rain, waiting for a bus to come. So it's a thing I'm passionate about, and also I'm working very closely with Councillor Wyatt. We do work together on this one, believe it or not, to hope we can bring this to an early conclusion and hopefully get the system eventually right. Mr. Chairman, that's what I've got to say.
Thank you very much. Mike, anything?
Yeah, just absolutely underlines the importance of getting this right. And there's nothing said there that I would disagree with. We are getting on with it as fast as our resources and the complexity of the system allows us to, and we won't stop until we've got it right.
Councillor Cooner.
I wanted to raise the issue of having RTI information on stops which haven't got a bus shelter, but where there's ad hoc services. So, for example, in my ward, I've got a bus service that comes in every 40 minutes. So, for example, it might be at past on one stop, and then it'll be like at 10 past after that, then the one after that. So if you don't know what time the bus came previously, you can't figure out what the next 40 minutes stop is going to be. These bus service, this particular bus service is used by a lot of elderly people in our ward. And as a result, they might not have the app, and they might have a language barrier, but if there's a clear sign that says the next bus is due at this time, they can have a look. I get a lot of comments from local residents say they never know when this bus is going to come. And my concern is this is a bus service that's predominantly used by elderly people in my ward who are vulnerable. And as Councillor Stanley said, sometimes people are, they're against the odds with the weather, etc. Is there something that can be done in terms of, so my concern is if people are then not going to wait for the bus because they don't know what time it's going to arrive unless they actually see it coming down the road, we're at risk of losing that service, but it's used by a lot of vulnerable people.
Yeah.
And that's going to have an impact on the usage and the amount of people getting onto the bus. And that's how obviously they're going to measure whether they can keep that service going or not. So I sort of like to understand what you could do in terms of those particular stops, especially the ones that are predominantly used by elderly people.
Thank you.
So I think, as you've correctly highlighted, I think where we're not always going to have a physical display at every stop because of the obvious financial constraints of operating an estate that large. So I think it's unrealistic over, I think it's 13,000 bus stops we've got in total, that we're ever going to have a physical display at every one of those. So that's where we've gone to the QR code thing and both the mobile phone based app. But there is clearly an issue for those that are not comfortable with using mobile phone technology. Many older residents are, but it is an issue. I think what we do is we're looking at defining the policies around our bus networks. We can start to look at criteria where there may be a case where there's particularly high need. If we've got a particular location where there's very strong evidence that there's a need for something, then I think we should have a system and policy being able to do that. But in the meantime, I would just encourage us batch members, let us know where you're aware that there's a particular issue, and then the teams can go and look at that location. We're always going to come back to the fact that we are constrained with resources, so it is highly unlikely that we'll be able to meet every request. But what we can undertake to do is to look at every situation. If there's something we can do, then we will do it. So Pete, if you wanted to add anything to that.
My only, just a couple of additional points into that comprehensive response, just to put it into context, because quite often there's a comparison, and we've heard mentions today about rail, RTI as well, and others. So the number of bus stops we have in the West Midlands is 4 times the number of railway stations across the whole of the United Kingdom. So it's quite a significant estate to be able to roll that out, and prioritisation is really, really important. It's also worth just remembering as well, one of the things that we do in the West Midlands is that we the published timetable information, I know that's printed information, but the fact that we actually do that and recharge that back to operators under the Local Transport Act, which is something significantly above and beyond a lot of others do, that's notwithstanding the fact that where there are technological opportunities to support that, then there may be occasions where we can.
Very briefly, sorry. The bus stop that I'm referring to as well at the weekend, which makes it even more challenging. Weekend, they have different times, so it might be on the hour. So like again, so it's every 40 minutes during the week, and then at the weekends is different operating hours, and that sounds like a service that slowly could get lost if we don't do something about it.
Councillor Trummans, Councillor Locke, and then Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very mindful of the question that's just been asked by the councillor and the response from officer relating to the QR codes referred to on page 28. To me, that seems the obvious answer. Yeah, the cost implications and logistics of having all those screens does mean that they're prohibitive, but almost everybody's got one of these little screens, and I accept that older people, it's me, struggle with some of the apps sometimes. So the QR codes, as long as they work in a user-friendly way, where it just says, please turn your camera on and hold it here, and then the QR code doesn't open an app, but actually just displays the information for that bus stop, rather than people having to press buttons and look at the small print. If it's that accessible, then even people who aren't digital natives, even older people or whatever, will be able to readily use it, and we won't need all those screens.
Yeah, once we've got the QR code out there, we can always refine where it points to. Mostly they will require you to open a browser. certainly on the Android platform. But yeah, we will look to make the thing we're rolling out as simple as possible. And I think we'll also, to the other point, goes to me, we've got various incentive funds. So where we are worried about particular areas, we've actually got people going out boots on the ground to try and talk to customers, and so we can address where we've got particular issues, do targeted things as part of other programs that we are delivering around ticket incentives. So there's an opportunity for us to do that as well.
Councillor Lott?
I agree with all that's been said, but I also like to remind that there are people who work in the nighttime economy, and also you know, social work, social care carers, and also NHS staff, you know, when their shift finishes, if there's nothing worse if they've got to wait in the dark, you know, like maybe the QE or somewhere, and the bus is late or something like that, leaves them vulnerable. Because that does worry me, all emergency service workers.
I think that probably comes back, I would agree with you completely, but it probably comes back to the bit that in terms of the customer experience, there's only so far that real-time information system will go. And if for telling somebody that a vehicle's going to be late or a service is going to be late is a minimum thing we should do. But really, we aim to not have the service late at all, and that's the real issue. So I suppose there's only so far that the RTI system can go. The rest of it, people will have licked within short order.
I mean, can't you work with the hospital trusts and things like that, because they can get information out to the staff on the wards and things like that to say, I don't know, the 21's going to be, you know, 40 minutes late, you know, or something like that, because it just seems easy to me. I don't know. Probably I'm not Job, or what's his name, the one who invented Microsoft.
Yeah, Steve Jobs and for Apple, and one of the things that Willie, you can expect to see improvements on is as we refine our disruptions information. So at the moment we're working with bus operators to get better quality information on the disruptions into the system. At the moment we're having to put a lot of manual processing time into that, and that is constrained because we're picking up that rather than the bus operator to get it into the system, and the staff that are doing that are just on normal office hours contracts. So that is a particular issue at night. What we're trying to roll out is a system to automate that, so that as soon as the operator has a disruption and they notify that on their own operating system, that will flow through automatically. And that will improve that nighttime thing, but it will also mean that we can start creating push notices to large employers such as NHS, so that they can then got the ability to communicate that to staff. So it's a great idea. Unfortunately, we're a couple of steps below where we want to be at the moment, where we're trying to fix the underlying ability to do that, and then we can start working with people to consume that information.
And just finally, we have the network scheme in Birmingham, and there's different hubs and boards and constituencies are linked up, and there's a firm called DigiKick, and they get people over 55, you know, using laptops and iPads and that to use computers. So, you know, it's getting them, you know, in the link onto the using on computers for various things. So it might be useful down the line to liaise that way.
Okay. Councillor Wood.
Thank you. It wasn't clear to, well, first of all, Mike, this report does set out the difficulties in making this system work, which I hadn't really appreciated fully until I read through this. What I couldn't work out though is what is the advantage of the QR code over the website, the TFWM app, or other third-party apps. I couldn't pick up why we're moving to the QR code unless it provides better information than you get from elsewhere.
It will provide exactly the same information. It's just what we've identified from a small pilot is some people just find it much easier to be able to just snap the image on the QR code, and it just takes them directly to the relevant piece of information. So we have all the right information, but for some of the apps and some of the other things, you have to search through a series of options to eventually land on the right piece of information. Where am I? What service am I interested in, etc. Whereas the QR code is tailored to the specific bus stop, so the system can then direct the user to immediately to the exactly relevant piece of information, but it is the same underlying information. So it's just another means to make this stuff accessible to people easily. It's not a whole new technology, if you know what I mean.
So it's no more accurate then than using Google Maps and clicking on the bus stop?
Well, hopefully it will be more accurate. So one of the things we've observed is Google can be 2 or 3 days behind our system of picking up updates. Say if a service has been suspended, often that information doesn't make its way through the sausage machine for 2 or 3 days. So again, when we get the underlying basics right, it means that when they click and they go to the QR code, or indeed to the bus stop on the app, they'll get the most up-to-date, most relevant information. And the QR code just gives people another means of being signposted to that information if they don't want to use an app. Not everybody does. Some people hate apps and hate the touch on their phone. So.
Yeah, but all of these different options are costing money, aren't they? And as is flagged up in the report, there is certainly the ongoing revenue costs of these systems. There is going to be an issue that needs to be resolved in the future. So I do think in terms of the communication plan, I think it is sensible and good to be communicating with people about how they can access this information. There needs to be some clarity really about each of these different systems and what information you're getting from them. I myself do use the Google Map, click on the bus stop. I accept what you say, but it seems to have been reasonably accurate for me using that piece of information, because of course you want to know what time the bus is coming before you walk to the stop so that you can't get the QR code until you get to the stop. So I do think it is important that there's quite clear communication with people about the best way to access the information that they need.
We'll absolutely take that on board. Yeah, and I agree. It's horses for courses, I think, and the app for me, I think makes sense for the customer. And that's why we're developing, and it's referenced in this report, the mobility as a service environment where you've got the full planning, purchasing, buying the ticket, and the like concierge, the guide whilst you're on your journey, all via the app. That's the ultimate goal, and we're as well progressed as any area on that. Yeah. So.
The other 3 hands have gone up. Councillor Alden, Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you. Just to follow up on the cost point, really. So, I mean, QR codes aren't particularly new technology. I think I first put one on a leaflet 15 years ago. They're also free to produce. So just that cost issue, there really shouldn't be any cost other than the cost of, I assume it's a sticker, is going to go on the bus stops. So I just want to make sure we're not, paying someone to produce all of these when they could be produced in-house very cheaply.
No, and the QR code's actually cost effective because you can't afford to put a physical display up. Then it cost of a vinyl sticker and a bit of back office systems to maintain that, and the information behind it is clearly an awful lot cheaper than putting a physical display up. So no, absolutely, just to assure you on that, we're not gone and reinventing the wheel.
Councillor McCarthy.
Yeah, I've heard a lot this afternoon about resource restrictions in doing the necessary key work and bringing this data up to date and making it truly current. It would seem to me that this is the kind of thing that if we bring it current, it will increase patronage. And increasing patronage means less of our services being under threat, and the opportunity to, even as the network grows, to recover some services that we've lost. Wouldn't this be a key thing for the shareholders of the operating companies to want to achieve? Because it will grow their business. Yeah, is there any contradiction of that?
Logically, no contradiction at all. And Pete might want to comment on this, but I think a number of the things that could have or should have been done to grow, develop, maintain bus patronage perhaps haven't been viewed in a strategic sense, and have been very short-termist. I think this is a prime example of something where you want to get it right for the customer to get the best experience, and that ultimately good customer experience leads to the business. It's not been a mantra that the bus industry has been famous for, perhaps.
Councillor Hyatt.
It's okay, Chair, the point I was going to make has been covered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Huxtable.
Thank you very much, Chair. My comment is relating to bus services that don't have bus stops or shelters, i.e. the hail and ride services that operate across the combined authority. What are we doing regarding those? And again, a lot of these hail and ride services are ones that we subsidise. They're the socially necessary bus routes. It is in our interest to actually promote these services so that they are commercially viable, picked up by bus operators, so we no longer actually have to subsidise them. So there's a direct benefit for us to actually get more patronage on it to make them commercially viable. Thank you, Chair.
Absolutely, and that is really the primary driver behind the large-scale pilot that's been run in Coventry, which has taken conventional ring and ride services and the demand responsive services from a commercial perspective, have integrated those. It's a horrible phrase, they call it co-mingling, which I detest, but it is where we bring these two services together, and that is an app-based environment, and that allows you to have many more bus stop points as virtual bus stops and to be able to ride hail. Quite positive results. The pilot is still ongoing and being evaluated, and the lessons from that we look and hope to be able to roll into the wider network across the whole of the West Midlands as part of the bus network reviews that are ongoing, ready for January 2025, and as part of the discussion, in fact, that you had in part, I believe, last month on the future of ring and ride.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Akhtar.
Right. Thanks, Chair. All of my colleagues, they made excellent points. Would you agree with me? The reason the operators haven't got it right because there are no consequences for them. Thank you. When the buses are late or they are ghost buses.
Mr. Waters, I don't expect an answer, but what is very clear, it's an issue that needs to be understood with franchising.
Absolutely, and one of the things you'll see from the report is we've been very careful in this report and for this discussion to leave what we are doing to solve problems we have today as a standalone thing. So whatever the future, whether the region decides to move towards franchising or some other model, we still have a problem that we need to solve today in the systems that we've got today. And if franchising were to happen, it won't happen until circa 2027, with the big if underneath that. And I don't think we can afford to sit and wait for that in order to fix this.
I see nobody else. I think we've had a very interesting discussion on this matter today, and I thank Mr. Waters and his team for the work done and the work you're doing, Carol, on this, because it is very important that we get this right. So thank you very much for that. We have recommendations in front of us. Are we agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Next item. Parking ride update. Now you will know that Tom Skidmore is not vice winner.
I was gonna say,
Not Monday, anyway.
Right, so we'll send her our best wishes and welcome Tom in her place.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, introduce myself. I'm Tom Skidmore, Head of Integration at Transport West Midlands. Unfortunately, my colleague Babs is unwell, and so I'm going to be presenting the update on Park and Ride and the recommendation, which is to consider and endorse the approach to the continued strategic and operational development of Park and Ride following the COVID-19 pandemic. And just to pick up some of the salient points in the report, Park and Ride usage is at around 59% of pre-COVID levels. Table 2.1 in the report shows there is quite significant variance across the sites and the days of the week as well. But fundamentally, the purpose and modal split of the sites is now very similar to pre-COVID levels. This change in Park and Ride usage alongside Local Transport Plan 5 has meant that the 2019 Park and Ride strategy does now need to be revisited, which will lead to a new integrated transit strategy to be developed this year that will identify opportunities for future Park and Ride development and sustainable travel measures across the estate. Also highlight some of the key projects and developments on Park and Ride. So at Dudley Port, upgrades to the interchange there, the transfer of ownership at Solihull, upgrades at Tyre Hill, and also the upgrades to Park and Ride CCTV at most of the sites. The other element of the report that I just want to highlight is around budget challenges. The report emphasising some of the increasing costs at our Park and Ride sites, and highlights that we will continue to explore how budgetary impacts can be managed more effectively to reduce the amount of levy required, which is a key element which will be part of the integrated transit strategy. I'll leave it there and take any questions. I may need colleagues to support me on some of the answers.
They're here. Commissioner Huxtable.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have a whole series of questions, I'm afraid, Tom. But let's start off with one of your specialities, because I know you also do Cross-City bus routes and Sprint as part of your integration role. And it's how we can best use Park and Ride at railway and metro stops in supporting the policy of the Line Authority in terms of Sprint and in terms of the Cross-City bus routes. So if you got the bus, for want of a better word, going past a railway station, integrating the two and perhaps having a shelter or stop actually as part of the Park and Ride, so we can live up to an integrated transport system, whereas you can seamlessly transfer between the train and metro and the Cross-City bus or the Sprint route. And I would like to see that as an integral part of the strategy that you actually refer to. I believe colleagues will talk about other issues, but on EV charging, I attended the launch at Selly Oak of the new EV charging points. How is the rollout there going as part of our Park and Ride estate in terms of other EV charging points? I know, I think Councillor Alden will mention Longbridge, but that's woeful at 19.23% occupancy. And as I think Councillor Alden will want to say more actually on that. With taking the Park and Ride over on Chiltern at Solihull, what are our charges compared to the charges of Chiltern? And how are they comparable? Will they differ once we actually take it over? I think there's a bit more detail. I appreciate you might not have all the answers now, so if they could be logged as an action point to come back to us. What about Dulwich? Because as I understand Dulwich, there's two car parks, a Chiltern car park and our car park. ours is free, Chiltern charges at there, so obviously our car park fills up first. Because it's free, mainly by Chiltern commuters first thing in the morning. If we're taking over the park and ride from Solihull, have we got any plans regarding the Chiltern Park and Ride at Dulwich and combining the two? What would then be our charging strategy? As I say, don't expect answers now. It's all food for thought as part of the refreshed strategy going forward. And the other point, you said you'll be refreshing CCTV cameras. What we also need is to look at all the lighting. So where we haven't got LED lighting, the most energy efficient, environmentally friendly at our park and rides, we need to replace the lighting as well. And CCTV only works properly if there's good quality lighting. Because I know at one of our park and rides, I found some gas canisters. And I asked for CCTV coverage, and they said because of the lighting levels, they couldn't identify anyone in relation to the illegal use of these gas canisters. And again, better street lighting, better lighting of our park and rides would be far better for us from a community safety perspective, and making sure that people who use it feel safe and their cars are going to be in one piece when they come back, but also in detecting illegal activity on park and ride sites as well. So sorry for the whole host of questions there.
Some very interesting points there, Tim. You don't have to answer as indicated, but when you do answer, Councillor Huxtable, I think committee would welcome the information as well, because what's relevant there for you is relevant to other members. Okay.
I can answer many of the points, not all. The first, I wholeheartedly agree with, and that is why, in terms of incorporating cross-city bus and sprint, supporting those services via park and ride, those are really important elements, and that's why, rather than a park and ride strategy, which was the previous terminology, which very much focused on solely rail use and mainly cars at parking, the integrated transit strategy will focus on all modes and emphasising active travel measures as well. So that should come through in the integrated transit strategy. It should be supportive of those bigger capital schemes as well in terms of sprint and cross-city bus. The second point around EV charging. One of the challenges with the rollout of EV charging has been the usage of where we TfWM own the site. It is easier because there is no guarantee that those rapid transit, those rapid EV chargers will be used by rail users, and that's one of the terms and conditions with our lease with Network Rail. So there are some legal challenges to Network Rail owned sites which we're working through. So that's I'll wait for a question on Longbridge later. Solihull, the charges will be the same for the first 6 months, and then that will be reviewed once we've the ownership is transferred. I'm unclear about the final points about Dorridge and lighting, but Andy might be able to help on that one.
Yeah, we've obviously got a strategy to update all of our lighting across the whole of our estate to LED going forward. I'm not sure about that site, but I can get an update for you in regards to where we are with that programme.
Yeah, just a very quick follow-up. Sorry, just a very quick follow-up. I think the question is not that the lights needed upgrade, let's say, but they weren't working, but they are working now. So I don't want you to do any unnecessary work, Andy.
No, thank you.
Councillor McCarthy.
Right, we covered some piloting of some new mobility hubs during the work of the Sustainability and Active Travel Meg recently. How do you see them fitting in?
So the mobility hubs will be covered in the integrated transit strategy as well, and a review of how successful those have been and whether they should be. There should be a wider rollout across all our park and ride estate.
Thank you.
Councillor Stanley.
Mr Chairman, same old thing again, being parochial and talking about Coasley. I see that from the report and listening to my members from Coasley, with the difficulty out still with the parking down there. I wondered if anything had been decided or anything had been sort of looked at, or a possibility of using the ground down there to increase the parking. How far have we actually got, Mr Skidmore? I've been banging the drum for this issue now down here for quite a number of years, and I'm not making much progress, and neither are the members for that ward of Coasley. So, you know, it would be nice if we could get something very positive back as a possibility of doing something in the immediate future. But all we seem to do, Mr Skidmore, is just talk about it and get nowhere. So perhaps we begin to take this a little bit more seriously now and look at any land or any space that is available within the area that could be possibly used. The inconvenience that this is causing, without any doubt, to the residents down there, a lot of them unfortunately use trains, so of course they can afford to have the drives blocked up. But of course what happens is it's enforcement. If they park on the pavement, it's up to the police to move them. If it's left in the street and no double yellow lines, we can do very little about it. So I'm hoping and making a plea on behalf, once again, as a good folk of Coasley, that we can seriously take this matter in hand and hopefully come to some resolution and finding somewhere for these people that use the station, which we definitely need to use trains these days, can actually park their car. It's not so much the people that live in Coasley and around the station that are causing the problem. They're having the problem. It's the people that, from my neck of the woods, believe it or not, that find to go from Sedgley or Gornal, it's the closest station to use. So it is, you know, an area in Dudley where we've only got two railway stations, one in the north and one in the south. The south is quite adequately provided for in Stourbridge, but the one in the north doesn't give the people or good folk in the north of the borough much opportunity to park. I don't know how to put this to you, but it's very difficult to do this in Wolverhampton, to be honest with you, with the situation over there. People have tried to park there and finished up with several parking tickets by going down wrong great streets and things like that to find a car park. So it is crucial, without any question, that we really do give some consideration to how far we are and what we propose to do about this situation we have with the parking in Coasley. I'm sorry it took me so long, but I needed to cover everything, Mr Chairman. Mr Skidmore.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not familiar with Coasley or the issues that you've outlined there, but I can. I think we should come back to the
Okay, David.
Thank you very much. I got a few points about the cross city line and then just one as a general point. So on the placement of electric vehicle chargers at Park and Ride, so a lot of the people will be using the Park and Ride, if not the vast majority, are then parked for the day because they're commuting to work. So they don't necessarily need to be rapid EV chargers because you potentially are going to have cars linked up to them for 6 or 7 hours. So I guess it's just finding the balance of what the most cost effective and the command authorities point of view would be for which type of chargers to put in. Just on some of the specifics around Park and Ride along the cross city line. So if you go north of the city centre on the cross city line, you got Chester Road, Park and Ride's 112%, Wild Green's 154%, 4X is 101%. So you've got 3 stations there, which are all in the red on the table in the report. I think what that tells you when you look at those specific locations is when we're looking at new Park and Ride or extending Park and Ride, the proposals going forward shouldn't focus just on extending existing Park and Rides. There are other stations on that line going North Erdington, for example, where you could potentially put in a Park and Ride where there isn't one currently that clearly demand in the north of the city. What I wouldn't want to see us doing though is just demolishing what are currently family houses around those 3 which are at capacity to build extensions when actually there are other stations where you could take out vacant commercial space if you were having to remove an existing building. So clearly all of them have a cost impact anyway. You've got to purchase land. But I think it's making sure we're open to building new ones as well as extending the existing ones. Picking up the issue around Sutton Coalfield, which is obviously not at 100% on here, that has some charges with it. And I wondered whether now is the time, given it's been a reasonable length of time since COVID, whether the actual level of those charges need to be reviewed and to see whether we would get more revenue in total by making discount on those charges to encourage a filling up of the capacity rather than having it operating at the 60% as it does currently. And then the other one was on Longbridge in the south of the city, which is a very large park and ride, 624 spaces, currently at 19% use according to the table. It's very clear the charges at that park and ride have not worked and are just counterproductive. The streets around the station are heavily parked upon. You've got car parking opposite the town centre. I think it's clear that here there needs to be a look again and either a reduction or frankly a removal of those charges, because it would be far better that the car park was being used and it's sitting now effectively empty. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alden. Yeah, I agree that we shouldn't just be considering existing park and ride sites and the whole of and not just rail either, but metro and even certain locations could be more suited to a bus park and ride, and all of that needs to be considered. And I'll sort of pick up both Sutton Coalfield and Longbridge together and charging, and all of that needs to be considered as to charging, what the right level of charging is, whether charging should be introduced at other stations and how that all works together, rather than picking out individual locations and saying it needs to go up or down or removed. It needs to be looked at across the whole of the West Midlands and all of the stations on particular lines as well.
Mr. Hyatt.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say, Councillor Stanley, one of the advantages of the new entrance to our new railway station is that you do go past two great big car parks, so it's much better than it was now. I'd like to draw people's attention to figure 2.3 and ask that, just as a matter of form, whenever we're given a bar graph, we have units which aren't there. And if they are percentages, which they probably aren't because they don't add up to 100, then we know the sample size, because you can't tell from those indicative values. They are just indicative values. There's no units there. And I would like units, and if they are percentages, the sample size to be given as a matter of course. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Noted. Should we get
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for all the questions and observations on the report. Just in terms of a wider point around park and ride expansion, we have noted already today that we have significant financial challenges in terms of revenue budgets and capping of the levy in a flat position. Obviously, any additional park and ride does have an impact in terms of additional operational costs, which need to be considered. And the whole point around charging is one that we do need to consider in a balanced way, but looking at the charge levels, etc. The other part of the discussion does need to focus on the very real challenge that we have of a lot of short journeys still being made to access park and ride because it is free. So the integrated transit strategies that Tom has mentioned will be a big part of understanding some of those trip patterns and are there more effective ways or efficient ways for people to be able to access the rail network, particularly through the use of mobility hubs and other solutions in those locations. But that is part of the wider work we need to bring in as part of that integrated transit strategy.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lyons.
Thank you, Chair. In reference to Solihull Station Park and Ride again, as a representative from Solihull, the £160,000 worth of improvements there made is obviously very welcome. But just a couple of questions. May I ask, why is it that Chiltern Railways was historically given lease of that car? Why is it now being returned to Transport for West Midlands? Who didn't want to renew the lease? And although we know what you said about the car parks remaining, the car park tariffs remaining the same for the next 6 months, I'd also be interested to know on current forecasts, do we think longer term the car parking charges there are going to or these car parking charges are cheaper at present from all short railways?
There we are. I'll pick that one up directly if I may, just only because I'm aware of the history of the car park at Solihull. The reason why originally that was put out onto a lease agreement was because that was the way in which we were able to attract the investment to deck the car park at Solihull. So the lease agreement was put out in a way that enabled the investment to be made by Chiltern, and then a period of lease under which they could seek to, if you like, recoup an element of that. But under the agreement, it was always stated that at the end of that period, then the car park would then be returned to, or the option for Transport for West Midlands to take that car park back into the estate. So that's why the intention, that now has expired, and that's why the lease is returning into its current position. In terms of the question around future assessments of charging, that again is not known. As you see, there is a vast majority of the estate where car park charges are not applied across the region, and certain locations where they are. But as we review the level to which those payments are made, and the level to which that can help to finance, I think the other point that's not been drawn out of the report, but in terms of the budgetary pressures, it does talk about the fact that there is £3 million circa per annum of revenue paid for to support the car park estate across the region. So any approach that we have to reviewing that should be with the intention of trying to reduce pressure and not increase it. So that's where the approaches will be reviewed at the appropriate time that Tom's referred to for 6 months. Thank you.
Okay, good. Councillor Marshall, you had your hand. You're not there. Okay, we have one recommendation identified. Are we agreed? Thank you very much. Cycle hire scheme, Pete.
Over to colleague.
By all means.
Yeah, good afternoon all. I hope you're well. I'm Andrew Brock of Operational Assets. I'm joined by Stephen Birmingham here, the manager. Between us, we're responsible for the management of micromobility solutions across the West Midlands.
Could you take the mic a bit closer?
Yes, sorry. You'll hear that starting.
That's better.
So Andy Thrupp, Stephen Birmingham, responsible for micromobility. West Midlands Cycle Hire is obviously an important part of that. Thanks for your time reading the report, and this sets out the funding that's needed to continue to offer the scheme until October 2025, which is when the current contract expires. This report also sets out some of the key challenges that we've experienced over the past 12 months, and how we are working hard to recover and improve the scheme for the people and visitors of our region. A little bit of background on the scheme. So this was launched in March 2021. 1,500 bikes purchased, and it was always planned to operate across all 7 local authority areas of the West Midlands. Overall, the scheme has been a success with year-on-year growth. We've seen over 135,000 individual users since launch, new customers constantly joining the scheme, over 1.1 million miles cocked up of the scheme, and we always get really good customer feedback when we answer it through survey. So, however, the scheme has had its challenges though. We've done a lot of talking to other regions up and down the country, and they're all experiencing the same. And some are even taking a drastic decision in order to stop operating the schemes and removing bikes completely from their regions. However, I'm pleased to be able to report that in the West Midlands, we're recovering really well and constantly improving the offer. Bike availability was down to just over 50% and is now back up to nearly 70%, and this is improving daily. So vandalism is also reduced significantly, and this can be attributed to all of the work that we do with West Midlands Police. our partners in the local authority that we stay in touch with very regularly, and also additional security features as well. And finally, customer behaviour is also improving with out of bay, out of zone instances reducing. And again, this is partly down to the work that we've been doing on reviewing the tariffs and the charges, and also some technological additions as well. Overall, these improvements have assisted us with being more operationally efficient, improving our KPIs month on month, all for the benefits obviously of our customers. So ultimately, when we assessed our options moving forward with the scheme, we obviously had to consider finances, value for money, and the success of the recovery plan that we've got in place, all firmly in mind. And therefore, we're recommending that the scheme continues to October 2025 with no significant changes to the current setup. During this time, we'll be able to continue to obviously make the improvements to the scheme where we need to, assess what the procurement options are going forward post October 2025, but also continue with our mission to get a sponsor of the scheme as well, which obviously helps financially. I think that's all I need to cover. Happy to take any questions.
Right, Pete.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to, just on the back of that update, just reiterate to members with regards to the report that from a financial perspective, and my colleagues from the finance team, that the medium-term financial plan that has been supported through CA board does take account of the level of funding that's being discussed here in the report, just for visibility and clarity. Thank you.
Right, this was considered during the sustainability and active travel meg fairly recently, where we visited the centre. And note from the report, we've got 283 vandalised bikes, which cost what 105,000 to repair. Significant missing in action bikes in effect with a room full of people tracking them and recovering. We're doing excellent work, but it means that sometimes up to half the bikes have been out of action for one reason or another. And also, we suffer significant loss from people using the payment app and effectively stealing the money. And quite often, that's a good way of taking a bike away and it disappears. I mean, the police, we've involved the police and some great work's been done there. But even finding some of these batteries for sale on the web. So what it comes back to from a recommendation point of view is we have this 2025 target for when the contract next comes up. It's not that far away considering the work we've got to do between now and then. In as much as the design of the bikes are very vulnerable to being vandalised, they can reasonably well be found providing the tracker device isn't vandalised, and also redesign of the payment system to make it much more robust. Yeah, so how far have you got with that?
Interesting question.
Yeah, can I phrase the question? Yeah. So what is being done to improve the design for a future contract and also to improve the design of the payment system? Thank you.
Yeah, so just in terms of the design of the bikes themselves, I suppose we're conscious of other areas in terms of what they're doing. I think when you look at the depot, potentially the other kind of model barrel bike was on show, which had the GPS unit underneath the basket of the bike. Which I think they've launched in Manchester now, which kind of protects the GPS tracker better than our model does. What we've done within our scheme, we have a secondary tracker that's available on all of our bikes as well. So when that kind of bike tracker does go down, we have got a kind of secondary element in terms of recovering that bike. I think reprocurement is kind of the kind of end goal with the scheme. I think we are still fairly new in terms of our mobility offer. The market is constantly changing in terms of what features are available on the bikes and scooters as well. So I suppose market engagement from this thing once looking at what our bike offer would look like from October 2025 is a real key focus for us at this point.
Yeah. And just to add to that as well, really appreciate your time down at the depot and obviously seeing some of the challenges that we actually face with. As Stephen said, I think the procurement and looking at October 2025 is key here. Obviously, we've already made investments into the fleet. There's only so much that we can do now, but we also need to bear in mind that October 2025, which you're completely right, won't be long. So early contractor engagement, early supplier engagement is really critical here, and really making sure that we give ourselves enough time in order to get the right contract in place going forward. And obviously that's one that will encourage more sustainable mode of transport and choices going forward, but also making sure that we get the best value for money as well for the public. So I think in short, we're trying to make these tweaks and changes to the actual bikes themselves, but really concentrating on October 2025 and making sure that we have the right engagement and the right solution at the end of it.
Thank you. I see nobody else, so we have 4 recommendations to consider. Will we agree?
Great.
Thank you very much. Item 9, member engagement groups. Any chair wish to add to the? Any chair wish to add to the report? Mr. Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At our recent meeting on the 1st of February, the meeting turned out to be very constructive, very helpful. We covered a multitude of things. I'm happy to report that there's now 12 of the transport safety officer in place. They're doing a brilliant job for us in every shape or form. I did personally thank 2 members of the group for their contributions, what they've made over the last few meetings, and that the safety policy and all the rest of us now put into place. And I'm quite happy with the way that the officers are dealing with things. That's what I'd like to add to it. But a very good thank you to those that participated and helped to move the thing along. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ward, did you indicate earlier?
Yes, please. I'd just like to say something about the last meeting of the Quality, Congestion and Environmental Impact MEG met on the 30th of January. And the first thing we did was we considered the conversation or debate that had taken place at this meeting, the last meeting of this board, following the presentation from Dr. Emma Ferranti of the University of Birmingham. If you recall, this was about the close proximity of cycle lanes and footpaths. I'm not sure you can do very much about footpaths, but anyway, footpaths and their close proximity to the road and the pollution that comes out of vehicles travelling along the road. We noted the Public Health England's position that the evidence indicates that the health benefits of walking and cycling outweigh any potential health risks and harms. The meeting then had 3 further presentations from the University of Birmingham West Midlands Air Project. The first was on an overview of source apportionment for PM2.5s. It's quite interesting that the biggest generator of PM2.5s is power and agriculture. That's 25% of the total. Traffic is actually second at 22%, so it's still significant source traffic for PM2.5s, and so no doubt we'll consider some further work on that as we go forward. Second presentation was on the lowering of motorway speed limits across the West Midlands, and the modelling from the University of Birmingham suggests that if the speed limit came down to 60 miles an hour, you get an 11% reduction in nitrogen oxide. If there was a further reduction to 50 miles per hour, that would result in a 17% reduction in nitrogen oxide pollutants. And then the third presentation we had was on the impact of air quality of bus fleet electrification. And again, the modelling by the University of Birmingham suggests that the electrification of buses across the network would result in a 27% improvement in NO2 and a 7.5% improvement in PM2.5s. Finally, then we had an update on the Zebra funding bid. You'll recall that is about purchasing of hydrogen buses. Rather disappointingly, what that update told us was that the current high price of hydrogen has undermined the business case for the purchase of those or operation of those hydrogen buses on the network. So we have 3 recommendations for this committee arising from our last meeting. First one is that this committee has takes a report on the Zebra hydrogen bus funding bid at its meeting. It says 22nd of March in the in the report, but I believe the meeting is actually on the 18th of March. So we're suggesting there ought to be a report tabled at that meeting. Secondly, that this committee urges TfWM and bus operators to accelerate the transition to a zero emission bus fleet across the West Midlands. That very much picking up on what we believe that 27% improvement in nitrogen oxide levels is a goal well worth grasping, and the sooner we can get there, the better. And then finally, the MEG itself will seek to engage with National Highways on the issue of motorway speed limits around the West Midlands. That should be an interesting conversation. It's going to be the art of the possible, of course. I think a reduction to 50 miles per hour might be too ambitious to achieve, but certainly it's worth having a conversation around reducing the speed limit on the motorway blocks to 60 miles an hour and capturing that 11% improvement in nitrogen oxide pollutions.
Thank you. You've clarified the West Midlands bit for the motorway blocks, which is a question I was going to be asking. Before we move on, Councillor Hyatt, I'd like to look at committee to see whether or not we wish to accept those recommendations.
Yeah, agree.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Hyatt?
Chair, much of what we could in our make has been covered today, but I wanted to take the opportunity to underline we have an invitation for all members to visit the Regional Transport Coordination Centre, which is here in Summer Lane, to see the reality of real-time information. It's that team that we have an invitation to go to see. So it's an ideal opportunity to visit the team, to find out more, to ask questions, and it allows us then to be in a better position should we be asked to make or comment on any decisions that are put before us.
Okay.
So we provisionally wondered about it being before the meeting on the 18th, and that's just a possibility. So please think about that. It would mean turning up a bit earlier that morning to the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Just clarity. Oh, sorry. What sort of time? What sort of time, Carol? Hour?
Sorry?
About an hour?
Well, I have to say, when we visited the Ring and Ride depot, it was about 20 minutes, half an hour. It wasn't any longer than that. And that actually, when you've got people in front of you and you're asking questions of, of them, that it's quite rapid exchange of information. It was a great way to get a lot of information in a short length of time.
The reason I'm asking the question, we've already agreed that we've got NTFS for the briefing, but half an hour, I'm pretty sure we could fit in. So if we put that as part of the second part of the member briefing, a visit, I think we can accommodate that on the same day. All right? Yeah. Okay. Okay, I see nobody else. Are we content with the recommendations and the reports? I see. Fine, thank you very much. Lindsay, work programme?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so members will have included within their pack the work programme for this committee and also the forward plan for WMCA board. And following the send out of these papers, there has been 2 additions made to the work programme, picking up the Zebra project update, which Councillor Ward touched on earlier. And also members are expecting the findings of the task and finish group in that member engagement and development.
Thanks for that. We've covered RTI today, and well, I guess we're covering the other ones, the hydrogen one with the Zebra report, so we're okay with those two. Obviously, that's everything that is possible from this committee has been completed. I mean, I'm not talking about the standardised rolling forward. Everything that this committee has generated, we will complete. Thank you very much. Okay, we agreed.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Okay, the date of the next meeting then,
Excuse me, Chair, we've got any other business because I've got an item because I did mention.
you have, so sorry. No, we have no item of ALB, but yes, we do. And I was, and again, actually, this is, we should have ALB on the agenda. No, that's been previously identified to the chair. Let's pick that up now. But we also should have petitions as a standard item on the agenda as well. And that's what Mary will be referring to.
Sorry, everyone. I have a petition from the councillors for Bromford and Hodge Hill. It is electronic and there's some paper copies to follow. I quote, "We request National Express to alter the 64 bus route for Bromford and Hodge Hill residents." So I will send that on to you, Pete, and to Anthony.
Start on this one first. We agreed, we just received them, except as is the norm. Councillor Chalmers and then Councillor Kiernan.
Thank you very much, Chair. With your permission, I could do with some direction on this. How best to raise it. It seems that in the papers we've looked at today, there's been a number of issues where stuff hasn't got back to how it was pre-COVID. We only had to look at the parking. One particular issue I'd like to raise is the Knuckle line that runs through Coventry and obviously Bedworth and Eton and the rest of it. That was a twice hourly service with 2 carriages pre-COVID, and now it's once an hour if we're lucky, 1 carriage. Could we add that to the work list, or is that something else we could do to look into that and see how we can get it back on track?
Tim.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'm more than happy to pick that up as part of the Rail, Metro and Sprint Mega meeting next Monday, I believe, and be happy to get after the meeting an officer to update Councillor Tromans.
Thank you for your help.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Kiernan.
Thank you. My point is to address the issue of meetings being quora, because what I'm finding is a lot of the meetings are clashing with other meetings that I'm having. Is it possible to have dates for meetings as soon as possible so that we can get them in the diary, try and ensure that that doesn't happen with quorum things?
It is a fair request. The obvious answer is yes, but we need to understand what is the best day for us to meet. Because it's often cited, well, you can't get into the car park because there's no space. Why not? Because there's too much happening on a Monday, and we have traditionally held our meetings on a Monday. And actually, there's an understanding that, if necessary, could change, preferably to a Thursday. Was that correct?
Wednesday, I believe.
Okay, got the wrong one. 50-50. I chose the wrong one. But yeah, we could perhaps meet of a Wednesday, and that in itself resolves the problem. Wouldn't it? You're going to tell me? It's first you've heard of it, is it?
Yes, it is, and Wednesday afternoons are a time when Pete, Mike, himself are not available as well. So we need to think about that carefully.
Okay, that's why I'm thinking ahead for a Thursday, because I knew that answer. Right. So, Robert.
Thank you. Just on the dates issue. So obviously councils will decide who gets appointed on in May, but the first meeting I think isn't until July. What'd be really useful is getting the dates for next year sent out in May rather than waiting till July. Because for all of the year cycles, it's suddenly the last thing that then gets added in people's diaries.
But I understand the point, but we've got to understand whether we continue to meet.
No, I understand that. Just wherever what's decided.
Once that's out of the way, then we'll get it out as quickly as possible. Mary.
Just to add to Councillor Alden's point, we don't know what you say. Councils will appoint and we need the dates, but we don't know who will be elected on or chosen to sit on TDOSC, or members may be standing down or whatever. There's a lot. There's also the mayoral election coming up, and we don't know yet how it will turn out. Just being technical.
Yeah, okay.
Dandy.
We know we've done a lot of work process-wise to go forwards, understanding the role of members, what the expectations. All that is coming together now. We'll get a pack together for all current members and for leaders as well, for them to understand the scrutiny protocol, etc., terms and conditions. I think we can say that we've done well this year to make sure that the process for next year works far better. So that in itself will be a good thing. Can I thank everybody for their attendance and close the meeting?
Council. Now we do voice next Monday.
Yes.